everyone, and welcome back. Our heroes of the Bible this week are Saul and David, the first kings of Israel. One day, a young man named Saul came to Samuel, the prophet and judge. Saul had lost some of his father's donkeys and wanted to know if Samuel had seen them. But when Samuel saw Saul, God told Samuel the young man was to become the first king of Israel. Samuel took the young man aside and poured some oil on his head. Then he prayed that God would help Saul rule the people wisely. God did help Saul. When the Ammonites attacked one of the Hebrew cities, Saul called the people together to fight, and they easily rescued the city. Then the people wanted to make Saul king. Before this time, Israel only had an army when one of the judges called the people together to fight. But as king, Saul had an army all the time. With the help of his son Jonathan, Saul began to drive the enemies of Israel out of the land, even the dreaded Philistines. But Saul disobeyed the Lord. Once he offered sacrifices to God without Samuel's help. Another time he defeated the Amalekites, but did not destroy all the people and cattle as God had commanded. So Samuel told Saul that God would take the kingdom from him and give it to someone else. That someone else was David, Jonathan's best friend. As a shepherd boy, David had played his harp for King Saul. But as he grew older, David became a mighty warrior. When Saul and Jonathan were killed in battle, the people made David king. David was a good, strong king. He loved the Lord and he loved the people. He defeated the Philistines. He defeated the Moabites and the Syrians and the Edomites and the Ammonites and the Amalekites. Israel at last became a strong, united nation spread all across the land that God had promised Abraham. He even brought back the Ark of the Covenant, which had been captured by the Philistines. But everything was not well. One of David's own sons turned the hearts of the people away from the king. The son gathered an army and marched against his father. But the son's army was defeated and he was killed. David was very sad. But God was pleased with David. He was a friend to God, a shepherd to his people. Your throne will be established forever, God said. Saul and the Witch of Endor. After Saul disobeyed him, God never spoke to Saul again. So Saul decided to consult a witch, even though he knew it was wrong. Right before a battle, he went to see her after dark and wore a disguise. The witch called up the spirit of Samuel, who told Saul that he would lose the battle and die the very next day. And that's exactly what happened. Armor bearers. Warriors were often accompanied by a young man who carried their extra weapons. Jonathan and his armor-bearer once climbed up a cliff and surprised a group of Philistines. When King Saul was finally defeated in battle, he asked his armor-bearer to kill him so the enemy would not capture him alive, but the boy refused. David's songs. When he was afraid, David often wrote songs known as Psalms. In Psalms 54, 4-7, he wrote, Behold, God is mine helper, the Lord is with them that uphold my soul. He shall reward evil unto mine enemies that cut them off in thy truth. I will freely sacrifice unto thee. I will praise thy name, O Lord, for it is good. For he hath delivered me out of all trouble, and mine eye hath seen his desire upon mine enemies. David the giant killer. Everyone was afraid of the giant Goliath. This Philistine was over 9 feet tall and was dressed head to toe in heavy armor. But David knew that God would help him fight Goliath. He took one smooth stone, put it in a sling, and flung it at his enemy. The stone hit Goliath on his forehead, and the giant fell over. The soldiers of Israel then won a great victory over the Philistine army. The city of David. David made Jerusalem the capital of his kingdom. The city was on a hill called Zion and had strong walls. He conquered it by climbing up the water shaft with a few of his closest friends and surprising the people who lived there. After that, it was often called the City of David. Well, I hope you enjoyed and learned something. And as always, you are invited to Sunday school at Pasco Community Baptist Church on Sundays at 10 o'clock.